Alaska dimensional gates, huh? This thing doesn't work. Matanui! Where am I? Oh. I'm in Matanui. Well, that's pretty convenient. I guess this is a sign as to what today's video should be about. Well, thank you for tuning into Duck Bricks. I'm Chris, aka the Brick Archivist, and I guess today's video is continuing our series on the LEGO Constraction sets. Of course, last time we looked at the precursors to Bionicle, that being the Slicers and Robo-Riders, and even some of the Voodoo Heads prototypes. And today, I guess we are going to be located in Matanui, and therefore discussing the golden years of Bionicle. Of course, joining me today, just like before, is our very special guest, Lego David, conferencing in all the way from Romania. Thank you so much for being here, David, and I'm very excited to get this discussion started. So I figured a good place to start might potentially be how both of us got into Bionicle as a whole. I know that while I was around during 2001, I certainly wasn't into Bionicle. I think I was a little bit too young. And all I remember from that year is getting some of the Happy Meal McDonald's toys, of the McTorin, of course. But I never really actually got into Bionicle until around 2009, which is actually pretty late. I was already into Lego, but I never really touched Bionicle until around then. And I know it's probably pretty surprising given that that's the year a lot of fans did not like, but I started getting into it around then, and I kind of caught up on all the story serials and the books and the comics and the movies, and had to kind of go back and get all the sets off of Bricklink and whatnot. But I'm curious how it was for you, and were you around, or do you have nostalgia for the early golden years of Bionicle?
Yeah, it's exactly the same with me. I only got into Bionicle around the same time, 2009, 2010. Well, 2010 was when it was ending, so I got into Hero Factory more. But we'll get into that later.
Okay. All right, yeah.
I knew about Bionicle, I knew about the stars, but let's face it, the stars weren't the most interesting stuff. Hero Factory got a really good release and really caught me, and it stuck with me until it ended in 2014. I feel more nostalgia towards Hero Factory rather than Bionicle, even though I know that Bionicle is objectively better.
That's really interesting, and we'll definitely get into that when we go over Hero Factory down the line. But I guess now is a good time to transition over to the sets themselves of 2001. And the way that we're going to discuss these is that we can probably discuss them in terms of the groupings of sets that came out. So we've got the Turaga sets, the Tohunga McDonald's toys, we've got the, of course, the 6 Toamata, and we've got the Technic Rahi builds.
Personally, I think 2001 is a bit overrated because, yeah, it's great, but people are acting like it's the best Bionicle year, which I don't think I entirely agree.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I don't think I'd call it the best Bionicle year as well, but for me, certainly, although I wasn't actually into Bionicle when it was out, I have some sort of nostalgia for 2001, and I feel like some of that, even though I wasn't there, is mostly from the Matanui online game. And the reason for that is because when I was getting into Bionicle in 2009, I was trying to find out online how to first get immersed in the story, and that's where I found, of course, Biomedia Project, which, for people who don't know, is a website that catalogs every single form of Bionicle media. So whether that's images or commercials or comics or especially the games, every single piece of content for Bionicle that isn't copyrighted like the full movies themselves is on Biomedia Project, and they have a downloadable file where you can play Matanui online game yourself. And that is really how I got into Bionicle, because I mean I had a few of the sets throughout the years. I would be gifted sets, and I wasn't really sure what exactly they were. I didn't understand their place in the story, so I didn't really appreciate them too much. And when I started playing Matanui online game, that was what really hooked me. I just absolutely fell in love with the atmosphere and vibe of the tribal aesthetic and the mystery surrounding the Toa and the island itself, and I feel like that mystery has really stuck with me ever since. And that's one of the main reasons why I'm really into Bionicle, and even really into Lego as a whole, is I kind of have to credit that game to kind of what brought me into this world. And that's probably why I value 2001 probably a lot more than it might deserve. A lot of the builds are a little strange and weird looking and oddly proportioned, but I do appreciate it, mostly because of that game, and because through that game, the builds are now nostalgic to me.
So I also played Nog a lot more recently. Nog played such an important role in the success of Bionicle in 2001, and to some extent into saving the company, because if not for that game, let's imagine how would Bionicle 2001 look like if there was no Nog. So there would be only like comics, and that's it. That would be it.
Yeah, now that you bring that up, I think that would be about it, because the larger game involving the Toa was, of course, cancelled. We had Tales of the Tohunga, but that wasn't really a big story content experience, and the movie was not made as well until 2003, so we really only had Monog to go off of, and LEGO almost didn't want to make that one. They kind of lost faith in Monog and didn't think it would be a major part of the Bionicle story, and Templar Games, the studio that created it, insisted on continuing to develop it, and thank goodness they did, because I don't know how LEGO would be, or even Bionicle would be, today if they hadn't chosen to keep on developing it. Now I guess we can transition over to the sets of 2001. I know that you weren't in the Bionicle fandom at that time, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on them and kind of how they shape up today in your eyes.
I only got into Bionicle when G2 came out, and then I kind of just researched the previous stuff that was before G2. I wasn't around, so I can't speak from a nostalgic point of view. But I do think 2001 was a great year overall, because you have the Tohunga, you have the Rahi, you have the Toa, a lot of variety of sets in just a single year. So I think the best sets of the year are easily the Rahi, because let's face it, they're awesome. I mean, look at those functions. They're punching each other and knocking the masks out. How fun is that? I also like how they built up from what came before. Like, we haven't touched upon competition, which was before Slicers. They had essentially the same function as the Tarakawa, where you just punch each other with the function, but Tarakawa is made a lot better, and they also have a lot of recolors for the masks. Like, they have a teal Kakama.
Right, and the other thing I really love about the way that the Tarkov in particular integrated the masks is that they didn't just use it as kind of a feature to attack or some mask that was slapped onto the side like some of the other Rahi. They actually integrated it into the snout and mouth of the Tarakava, and I think that was a really cool example of how the designers put in a way that you could use the masks as something other than, well, masks, and actually use them to form the face of a creature. And I think that was what inspired a lot of people to kind of start thinking of the masks as just building tools and using them in all sorts of different ways and shapes, kind of like what LEGO is all about. You shouldn't just use one piece for its one intended purpose. But I guess on the topic of masks, we can kind of move on to the big thing about 2001, the collectibles.
Collectibles kind of went downhill after 2001, honestly. I love the Kanoki masks. I think getting the same masks in so many different colors was a brilliant decision, because you can make a wide variety of mocks with so many colors instead of having it in just one color. Like, let's say the masks only came in one color, like a red How. I mean, yeah, you can make a Taku, but it would feel like just another Taku revamp or something. If you got a recolor of the How, you can make a different Toa. Like, it doesn't have to be Taku, it can be a different Toa. Getting the same mask in so many different colors definitely sparks the imagination, and you can start to see the mask as not the How, for example, as not just Taku's mask. You can see it as a mask in general for a lot of things, not just Taku.
Yeah, you know, I 100% agree with you, and I think the power of the collectible masks is twofold almost, because not only could you, as you said, use them and create your own characters based off of them, but you could also kind of follow the Toa on their journey, because they were doing the same exact thing as you, the consumer. They were trying to collect all the masks and level themselves up, which is exactly what you're trying to do when you're buying the mask packs. So it was kind of a really great experience, and the fact that they were sold in blind boxes and blind bags really meant that you could just get any color or shape of mask that you might not expect, so you could trade it with your friends, get a lot of people interested in Bionicle, and as well as potentially have multiples of these same masks so you could use it for different stuff like armor and different kinds of faces and whatnot. So really powerful collectibles here, and the one thing that really bugs me about it is that they didn't really do this past 2001 and to an extent 2002 with the Chrono. The modern Bionicle collectibles were mostly projectiles, and that's the thing I really don't get, because Sure, you can have different colors of Zamra spheres, and alright, that's fun in and of itself, and different colors of Rotika spinners and whatnot, but it's not as much strength as you get from having a different color of mask. And the thing I don't understand is that if you have the molds already, why not just recolor the masks instead of recoloring, say, the spheres or the spinners? And I get that it's more plastic to recolor the masks, but was it really that big of a deal? And I get that it wasn't really a focus in the story to collect the masks, but they could have easily made it a bigger focus if they continued with recolors. And obviously one of the best things about later Bionicle was when we would randomly get a recolor, like in the Karzani set, we got a dark blue Ruru. And those were very, very rare to get, and usually we just get the same exact color and the same exact shape. So kind of a disappointing thing about later years, and I don't really know why they went in that direction, because I'm assuming that the masks in 2001 were really popular, and I don't know why LEGO would do that.
Yeah, so they also carried this the recolor mask into 2002. For some reason, people tend to forget about the 2002 masks because they're not as iconic as the 2001 ones. Like, Hal Nuva doesn't look as iconic as Hal from 2001. And I even saw some people in the Bionicle fandom saying they don't like those masks because they think they look ugly and they're a bit oversized compared to the previous ones. But it's still nice that they did that for one more year, even though it was just that, another year.
Yeah, I think personally I'd kind of fall into the camp of Bionicle fans who do not much care for the Nuva masks. I feel like they're a little bit too organic for my taste, especially because a lot of the other masks had a very distinct tribal aesthetic to them, and these almost look like they were made to be rubberized or almost organic and alive, which obviously works well for the Krana, because the Krana are organic. The Nuva masks, though, are not, so I wasn't really understanding the whole design aesthetic of them, and they will try these sorts of things again. Of course, we got organic styled masks with the Toa and Nika, but even those ones I feel were a little bit better, both story-wise, because again, those were supposed to look organic, and even design-wise. I can name quite a few of the Inika masks that I actually am a fan of, like Jalar's Calyx, for example. I don't think I can name a single Nuva mask that I actually really like. Maybe the Miru Nuva, but even that one's a little bit too bulky for me. So personally, I wasn't the biggest fan, although as you said, it was really nice to get just one more year of mass collectibles. But I guess with that, we can move on to really just going over these sets, and specifically, we haven't really talked about the Tohunga and Turaga that much, because we've already kind of touched on the Rahi.
I'll briefly touch upon the Turaga and the Tohunga because I haven't talked about those. I feel like the Turaga don't quite hold up as well as the Toamata because they're literally just some Technic pieces thrown together into a humanoid shape. However, each of them has exclusive masks, an exclusive staff piece, and the recolors for the feet. The feet use actually the Mata heads, but in recolor to use them as feet pieces. And they all retailed for $3, which I don't know if I like the Turaga as sets necessarily, but as parts packs, I think they're great. Because you get so many recolored parts and new molds in just a $3 set, which is something LEGO doesn't really have nowadays.
I completely agree, and I think honestly the closest possible analog to something in today's times would be, say, the collectible minifigures, but even those are $5 each and usually only come with maybe 1 to 2 new molds. And these came with at least 2 new molds at the very minimum, as well as multiple recolors on parts and whatnot. So really great parts packs, and again, yeah, slightly odd builds, but the one thing I do appreciate about them is that they actually tried to differentiate them in terms of height, at least. For example, Oniwa is a lot taller than the rest. Wanoa, of course, is a lot shorter and kind of has a hunchback, and of course there's a lot of just differentiations in them, pretty much just done by how long the Technic axles are and how many Technic bushings that they have in between their legs and their feet, but honestly, that does a lot to give them their own distinct personalities, and that's one thing I kind of appreciate about them. It's kind of a simple charm to Bionicle 2001.
However, I do like the Tohunga a lot more than the Turaga because I actually feel like the Tohunga actually have a lot more charm than the Turaga because, I don't know, they just look really cute to me. Like, they're like chibi versions of the Toa, if I can say like that. They're like, Jeller's like a mini Tahu or something. I think that's kind of cute.
Oh yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. The Tohunga are one of my favorite parts of 2001, just because of the simplicity of them. They only use very basic parts and really just large sculpts for the arms and legs and whatnot, but there's just something about their proportions, and especially the way that they were animated in the Matanui online game and the subsequent Borak animations and whatnot, that really made the viewers kind of attached to them as villagers and almost like self-insert characters into the story, because they really didn't have any powers of their own. They were just kind of observing the Toa go about their heroic duties, but they were trying to help out where they could, and some of them were just trying to scrape out a life for themselves on Matanui, and that was something that was really nice about them. The other thing that's really major about the Tohunga in particular is that they were actually McDonald's exclusives. So you could get them with a Happy Meal. And I think that's something that's really, really great, and we can get into this, but giving kids the opportunity to get into the world, even just a glimpse of the world of Bionicle, through just buying a Happy Meal was probably one of the best decisions that LEGO made for the theme. Because a lot of kids would just discover them, there'd be a little pamphlet telling them to go to the website, and these were much higher quality toys than what you'd usually get in a McDonald's Happy Meal. So a lot of kids were curious, and this is probably what got a lot of people into Bionicle as well, is just having them so widely available through Happy Meals.
That was a really smart choice. As a kid, imagine going to McDonald's and you get a Happy Meal, you enjoy a fresh hamburger and a new villager toy. It has so many exclusive parts. It has exclusive mask recolors.
Yeah, imagine getting an exclusive mask with your Happy Meal. Like, man, that was really great.
Yeah. And I also like how they gave so many unique colors to those. We already discussed previously how the slicers use teal and purple. And 2001 was the last year to use these colors, and they appeared on Kongu. He has a teal Miru, and Onepu has a purple Pakari. And those are really nice recolor and really useful pieces.
For sure, and those are actually only mentioning the colors that are either now discontinued, like this purple, or have been discontinued for many years and only recently brought back, like teal. Of course, we got a lot of really nice recolors, like with Huki's mask. That shade of orange wasn't really seen in Constraction until the G2 Pohatu sets, as well as the sand blue on Matoro, which is also a really rare color. So really nice things to get all around, and obviously it was just really special just getting these strange recolors and parts that you wouldn't normally see in sets in a McDonald's toy. And I totally understand LEGO can't really do McDonald's toys anymore. The only ones that they've done since outside of this era of McDonald's toys have been essentially just the cups. They put out cups for the LEGO movies, which are pretty boring in comparison, very boring in comparison. And I understand why. It's because they don't want kids to choke on the pieces, but it's really a shame. And I kind of wish they'd do something like this, because this definitely got a lot of people into the theme.
Because of that, they also seem to be quite expensive on the secondary market. So getting like one villager is going to cost you like $10 on Bricklink.
Really? I didn't realize that. But I guess with that, really the last thing left that we have to discuss are, of course, the Toa Mata themselves, the main stars of the line. And to be quite honest, I don't exactly know if there's too much we can say that hasn't already been said. Sure, the arms are floppy and the gear function isn't refined, but these are really the standard Toa, and what really got a lot of people into the theme is just being able to collect all sorts of these colorful characters. I really like how they balanced primary and secondary colors, especially with Tahu in orange, Liwa with green and light green and so on. So kind of interesting color schemes, and I appreciate that they worked with what they had. They're pretty much clone builds, but there's something different about every single one of them, whether it be in stance or the types of limbs used or what kind of hand or weapon configurations they have. And Pohatu, for example, has his torso upside down, so he can run and kick instead of just being waving his arms around. So I like how all of them had something that differentiates them, and obviously we talked at length about the mass collectibles earlier on, but I guess that this is a good time as any to wrap up this video on 2001, which represents the golden year of Bionicle. We talked a lot about the collectibles and the side builds, and of course we'll get more and more in-depth into the Toa and the Toa Nuva when 2002 rolls around, and we're really going to compare and contrast those. So thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Constraction Conversations, and stay tuned for next week when we will be releasing our video. Depending on how long we go, it'll be 2002 and 2003, or just 2002. We'll see how much we have to discuss there. So thank you all so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Be sure to subscribe to Duckbricks for even more LEGO news, reviews, analyses, and discussions, and much more coming your way very soon. Thank you, and bye-bye for now.